Many who respect your work feel your tweets are often impulsive or even expedient. Very funny. In certain interactions. Would you consider a change in the way you tweet? Well, I've been considering that for a very long time. One of the things I did in the last month, that I think was productive. Twitter's a hard medium to manage because it rewards impulsivity. And I have somewhat of a temper, and I suspect that maybe I'm more susceptible to being tempted to respond in a too forceful manner. Maybe I'm more tempted by that than I should be. But Twitter is real useful. I mean, it does keep me updated with regards to the ongoing, let's say, war that's raging at the bottom of our culture. And it does enable me to stay in contact with people, at least to some degree. And it's a great way of communicating small, but at least in principle, important ideas. And also to let people know about what I'm doing on YouTube and with the tours and all of that. People seem to respond positively to those sorts of notifications. So what I did do in the last month was to find people. I tweeted out one day, I asked people to send me the Twitter handles of organizations or individuals who were reporting on positive developments in a credible and realistic way. Humanprogress.org seems to be doing that really well. I thought it would be good to tilt my Twitter feed toward, or my Twitter my actions towards things that are positive and also true as much as possible. And so I've started doing that in the last month. I feel somewhat of an obligation to, if I'm being discussed publicly by journalists or other professors, and they misrepresent me or misrepresent the ideas that they're purporting to discuss, then I feel like I have a moral obligation to, I suppose, one is to defend myself, I suppose, and certainly to object to the misutilization of ideas by my fellow academics. I don't know if that's reasonable or not. It's not easy to figure out in a situation like this how much you shut up, how much you stay patient, how much you push back, how much you fight, how firmly you respond, whether or not to use wit. I mean, the rule I tried to outline in my book, 12 Rules for Life, there's a chapter called Don't Let Your Children Do Anything That Makes You Dislike Them. And there's a philosophy of discipline in there. And it really has two dimensions, let's say, or two. It's at the juncture of two ideas. One idea is that you don't want to make any more rules than necessary because you get tangled up in them. So minimum necessary rules. That's a good guideline for setting up any structure, even in dealing with yourself. And then if you're going to have rules, you have to enforce them because otherwise they're not rules. And so how do you enforce them? With minimal necessary force. And some of that has to be played with, and experimented with, so you know what minimal force is. Those are really good principles, and I try to govern myself by them in my Twitter behavior. And I hope that that's successful. Sometimes when I've gone after people, I went after a couple of journalists in Canada last year who wrote what I would regard as scurrilous and incompetent articles. That's a bad combination. And, it was kind of a harsh exchange, I would say. But it isn't clear that it was the wrong thing to do. So it's hard to know how much you have to skirt the ragged edge of disaster if you want to do things right. So anyways, I am changing the way I tweet because I'm trying to make it, the bulk of it, informative and positive. I guess I should say something about that too. You know, there's a lot of really good things going on in the world. So we have poverty, absolute poverty, between the year 2000 and 2012, which was 3 years ahead of what the UN had hoped would happen. You know, and cynics say, well, you have absolute poverty, but the cutoff was kind of arbitrary. It was $1.90 a day, if I remember correctly, which obviously is quite low. So it's not a real transformation. It's a real transformation. Some number had to be picked to represent absolute poverty, and I don't suspect the UN erred on the side of capitalist over-optimism. Perhaps they did. About hundreds of thousands of people are being connected to the power grid every day. Now, fresh water is available not to fewer and fewer people, but to more and more people, and that's happening extremely rapidly. You know, starvation in India and China is a thing completely of the past. You never hear about that. And that's pretty much the case for the rest of the world, except now and then for political reasons. So, you know, everybody's got a cell phone, and anybody who doesn't is going to have one in the next 10 years. And that puts in people's hands a degree of communication and access that would have been absolutely incomprehensible even 15 years ago. So it seems to me that it seemed to me that it was worthwhile to change the way that I was using Twitter, because all these good things are happening, and just concentrating on this polarization process that seems to have gripped us in the West seems counterproductive given all those good things that are going on in the background. Now, that doesn't make what's going on in the West with regards to political polarization trivial, but it does set it inside a much more positive context. So that's something to keep in mind. What of a client's need for autonomy/identity in therapy? They would prefer that which is meaningful and therefore under their control. Is this not unhealthy? I'm not exactly sure what to make of that question. Well, first of all, let's try what of a client's need for autonomy, identity, and therapy. That's paramount. I mean, in my book, in chapter 9, assume the person that you're listening to knows something you don't. That's so that you can learn something, maybe, because you need to learn something. Because, like, what do you know? In therapy, I don't think that if you're a good therapist, you try to take responsibility for the decisions that your clients make. Like, you don't take that decision making onto yourself, because you have to adopt a position of radical ignorance. You know, a person is sitting across from you, and this is the true of every person. You know, a person is sitting across from you, and they don't understand themselves, but you really don't understand them. And if you're a therapist, or maybe even if you're a friend or a partner for that matter, the person wants help. And so something's wrong as far as they're concerned. And there might be some way to fix it. That's your initial starting place, I would say. And both of you have to kind of agree on that in a psychotherapeutic situation. Well, but you don't know what's wrong. You know something's wrong because the person is upset enough to come and seek counseling. So they want to set their life right, but you have no idea what's wrong. You don't know anything about the way they think, or what they value, or what their past is, or what they're like physiologically, or what their temperament is like, or how things are going in their relationships, or what their career is like. The things you don't know about that person, man. It's intersectionality gone mad, I can tell you that. And so you got to listen and let the person tell you what it is that's wrong, as if you don't know, because you don't know. And you have to ask questions of clarification. But you always have to remember, not only do you not know what's wrong, maybe the person doesn't know what's wrong. It's highly probable they know that something's wrong, but they don't know exactly what, and they certainly don't know what caused it. And so You got to listen radically and clarify and ask questions and make sure you're not confused so that you do understand. And maybe you can help the person start to understand what they're talking about or thinking about, because talking and thinking are very much the same thing. And then, well, maybe you get some sense of what's wrong and maybe some sense of how it came about. God only knows how long that'll take. And then the next thing you have to figure out is, well, what would a solution look like? Like even hypothetically, what does the person want? And do they know what they want? And if they don't know what they want, then how can you help them figure out what they want? And how do you help them figure out what they need? And how do you help them admit to that and all of that? And so that's a boatload of listening there again. You know, and it's the same in every relationship that you have. If you're trying to foster that person's development, you want to find out, well, what's wrong in their lives? But they have to figure that out, because they're the ones that will have to bear the responsibility for the decisions. So you don't want to take that onto yourself. It's like, well, I don't want to tell you what to do because I don't know what you should do. Like, we can both agree that you should move toward what's better for you and hopefully for the people around you, because we would include that in the definition of better, right? Because otherwise it's not sustainable. But we have to talk forever to find out what that is, and you have to be very incautious